what's your biggest challenge? And, a third of the room will say, oh, I have a cash flow problem. Now they learn this pretty quick. So as soon as they say they've got a cash flow problem, I start digging in and say, you don't have a cash flow problem. You got a profit problem. Cash is not your problem. If you get profitable, cash will fix itself. Now we can always improve that and make it flow better.
Welcome to Mission to Grow, the small business guide to cash, compliance, and the war for talent. I'm your host, Mike Vanoy. Each week, we'll bring you experts in accounting, finance, human resources, benefits, employment law, and more. You'll learn ways to access capital through creative financing and tax strategies, tactical information you need to stay compliant with ever-changing employment laws, and people strategies you need to win the war for talent. Mission to Grow is sponsored by Assure. Assure helps more than 100,000 businesses get access to capital, stay compliant, and develop the talent they need to grow. Enjoy the show. Understanding labor productivity. You spend a lot of time in this show. You spend a lot of time watching the news and reading these days. The war for talent is real. We've been, up until very recently, sub 4% unemployment rate. This is not a mystery. It's not a pandemic. It's not presidential politics. It's not wars. Those things obviously influence the short term. But based on birth rates of 30 and 40 years ago, we could accurately predict how many people were going to be in the workforce. And as the economy continues to lumpy grow, there are more job openings than there are job seekers in the marketplace today. This war for talent is real. And so we talk a lot about how to, in traditional HR topics, how to get them, find the right people and stay compliant and train them. But I think sometimes we miss the biggie. It's how to make your workforce more productive. I've got a great guest. He's written a couple books on partially this topic. Really looking forward to today's conversation. My guest today, an introduction here. He's a speaker, entrepreneur, and a financial expert. His firm has been named the Inc. 5000 fastest list. He's presented in over 15 countries, frequent speaker to groups like EO, Scaling Up, Vistage, and AceTech. He's a member of the entrepreneurs organization EO for the last almost 9-10 years. And he's author of Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits, and Simple Numbers 2.0, Rules for Smart Scaling. Really good books. Read both of them. Highly recommend. He's a partner at Carr, Ingram, a top 25 accounting and advisory firm. Welcome back to the show, Greg Crabtree.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Always happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so no joke, folks. Read the book. It's a refreshing look from a business owner's perspective, how to think about what I'd say is kind of counterintuitive to a lot of traditional CPA bookkeeping advisory firm stuff you're going to get. And one of the big topics Greg talks about is this labor efficiency ratio. So I think maybe before we talk about how to get the most out of your labor, can you just maybe orient folks, Greg? What is this LER, this labor efficiency ratio, and why is it so important that they understand it?
Well, so I took a different approach. When I joined the entrepreneurs organization, I started to see myself as an entrepreneur with the same problems as a business owner that did accounting and other consulting work at the time. I thought of myself as an entrepreneur rather than classifying myself as a CPA.
Yeah.
And I always had an interest in why do some businesses succeed and other businesses fail? And, I was pretty good as a number jockey. I could run calculations, and early on in my career, I was probably a little more heavier proponent of leverage and debt until I saw the errors of my ways and saw the danger that it put a lot of people in.
Yeah.
And so when I joined EO, it put me on a journey to don't tell people what I think I know right then. I need to go study. I need to go look at things and say, we had access to hundreds of businesses' data sets. Yeah. And so it's like, well, maybe it's worthy of a refresh look. And I got, kind of early on in my EO career, I'd served on the EO global board from 06 to 09. And when I was rolling off the global board, which is about 12 weeks a year of board service, it's kind of a unique organization that they have long board meetings all over the world, and so I was away from the business a decent amount of time. And rather than put that time back in the business, I started developing my ideas around a book of the things that I'd been percolating on. And fortunately, we had started a program called the Accelerator Program to help businesses get over that $1 million revenue threshold. And I taught about 15 of those Money Day sessions that summer and perfected kind of my message, because it was as much of a laboratory as anything. I had some ideas to put on them, but I also had to say them in a way that's non-accounting to get feedback. Was I connecting? And so after those 15 presentations, I really felt like I had nailed down, a couple of simple rules of, first and foremost, clear distortions. I got to be looking at economic truth. And typically the biggest distortion for your audience of privately held businesses is the owner not taking a market-based wage. So that's a topic in and of itself, but that's stage one. Now we're looking at truth of once you pay yourself a market-based wage.
Yeah.
And then it is, is there a flaw in traditional financial presentation? And I don't really remember the DNA of what led me to this, but the thing that we figured out was, well, I say that I had a forum mate in my EO forum that had a construction business, and he wanted to always tell us about him being a $20 million construction business. But I had a hold of his data, and once I took his revenue minus his materials and his subs and got down to gross margin, he was a $2.5 million services business, which was the reason why he had 3 employees, and could do 20 million top line, but it really wasn't 20 million. He was a $2.5 million business.
Because most of this money was going out to subs, but he was counting that top line as revenue.
That's right. And tons of businesses do this. And it's not that it's wrong, but it led me down this path of starting to study. And once we made the gross margin discovery, the next discovery was just hit us in the face like like the fish that they throw at Fulton's Fish Market in Seattle. It's like, it just hits you in the face of going, dang it. It's gross margin compared to all labor. I don't care what kind of labor it is. I don't care if it's direct labor. I don't care if it's your labor, as the CEO down to the floor sweeper. They all count. Labor's labor. And once we cleared that distortion of revenue being such a fake number in most cases, it's like, duh. And I'll tell you, I wish it was more complex because I could charge people more for it, but it really is pretty doggone simple. Now, there's a lot of nuances to techniques and concepts of how do you improve it and all that. So we're not going to run out of something to do anytime soon. But the math is just so painfully simple. And it is so painfully hard to teach people just how simple it is. Yeah. And it's like they keep wanting to add to it. I want to include. No, don't. It doesn't matter. 90% of the businesses in the U.S. will hit their profit target if they get $2 of gross margin for every $1 of labor.
When you
no more complex than that.
The first time I read it, the first time you said it, I'm like, okay, that's a benchmark. But I imagine this bell curve that 2.0 is in the middle, but lots of stuff out here in the outliers. And I think
it's not a bell curve, it's a tower.
Yeah.
And so what it does, it runs along going, not profitable, not profitable, not profitable. And you get to 1.9 and it shoots up, and you get to a 2, you get to a 2.1. And then anybody that's above that 2.1, for those that 90% that meet that criteria, you start burning your people up. You are what we call running hot. So yes, a high labor efficiency ratio is great mathematically, but it's also a warning sign of saying, I've got an Audi SQ5 that fortunately has a little feature in it that you can set a maximum speed warning. And it is very, very good because the car is so smooth and accelerates so fast that I hit that speed warning a lot more often than I should because I don't feel like I'm going that fast. But you need these kinds of metrics to give your eyes the target to look at and measure how it's moving. And now I will give the one disclaimer. On the high side, if you're a distributor or if you're a retail business, you need a 2.5. And there's one other one that you need a 2.5. If you're a union shop, you need a 2.5. But other than that, most everybody's a 2. Now, there's a few businesses that if you're a staffing business, we don't count the staffing labor that you're running payroll on because you really don't manage those people. They may technically be your employee, but you don't manage, so you really look at the margin after that and compared to your management labor of your recruiters and processors, and you meet the standard there, but other than that, I mean, this is just and the thing is, I just did an event in Dubai last week. It's the same number for businesses in Dubai. I mean, I had the whole room doing exercise, and it's like everybody keeps coming back to that 2 number.
Okay, just to make it real for folks, Greg, could you just go through a couple of the actual use cases?
Sure.
So let's say you're a retailer, distributor. Yep. How do you get to this 2.5? I know it's stupid math.
So the idea, if you're a distributor, the idea, you're doing $100 million in product, you're doing at 10% margin. So distributors, high volume transactions, low margin, typically you're just a facilitator of big chunks of transactions. So you got $10 million of gross margin.
Yeah.
Well, essentially I can afford to have 2.5 million, 10 divided by 2.5. What does that work out to? I can afford to have labor, in that 3.5 million range.
Yeah.
So essentially it gives you your cap of what you can spend. And then what I have to do as the business owner, it's just like I'm managing a NFL franchise. How much do I spend on offense? How much do I spend on defense? And so I got to spend some money on direct labor, and I got to spend some money on management labor, but I've got a constraint. I've got a cap that I've got to fit it in because, people come to us all the time thinking, oh, my facilities costs are too high. Oh, we're spending too much on paper clips. And it's like, no, you're not. Oh, this is fine. I mean, we've rarely seen a business that had a cost problem other than the productivity of their labor.
Right.
And so by knowing what that metric is, and this is an immediate health diagnostic on the total number, because these businesses that I did a workshop for in Dubai, I mean, I had them put in their numbers in the structure, and I went around business to business and I said, okay, you're at 1.8. Guess what? That means you're below your profit target. And, and sure enough, once you calculate the profit, I said, now you got 2 choices. When I'm below, I can either cut labor or I can tell myself that we're going to grow into it. We called
in the room for some of those conversations, sometimes other companies, sometimes my own.
We call going into your labor is stage 1 of denial. And typically you need to do a little bit of both, but there again, it could be that, when you sold enough. So I'll give you a real life example. So I'm doing this class up in Connecticut last year in September, and this marketing firm, was there and trying to grow a business. Yep. She was struggling. I said, listen, all right, let me just simplify it. How much are you going to spend in labor for the month of October? Now we're middle of September, within a gnat's eyelash, how much you're going to spend in labor next month.
Yeah.
She said $50,000. Great. Do you need to bill $100,000 of service revenue, which is after you've paid for subs. So if you use any freelancers, they don't count. So you got to, whatever you bill minus your freelancers, that's your pure services revenue that you need compared to your total labor of 50,000. Yeah. Have you sold enough? She said, yes. Great. Can your people produce that much in a month? She says, yes, but. Okay, what's the but? Well, we're still finishing up projects we've already been paid for that are getting in the way of new work. And I said, that's a problem. And I said, and you're not going to like the solution, but there is only one solution. It's called get your team together and say, listen, team, here's the performance standard. This will, and I validated with our numbers, it absolutely put her at the right profit number. She gets to the 2-to-1. Say, no mystery. Said, here's the performance standard. For the next 30 days, we got to pull double duty. I only need you to do it for 30 days, but we have to get caught up and have a full month of active production in 1 month, and then we'll be stable from there. And that's your only choice. Or otherwise, you're just going to be chasing your tail, month after month, and always be behind.
And I think it'd be, tell me if I'm thinking about this right. I as an entrepreneur, it'd be easy to think, oh, this is just a short term. This is just a cash flow problem. This isn't a profit problem. But it's a problem that never goes away, right?
So I can't tell you. I mean, every time somebody comes up and says, I like in these classes I'll do, we'll go around and ask the room, okay, what's your biggest challenge? And, a third of the room will say, oh, I have a cash flow problem. Now they learn this pretty quick. So as soon as they say they've got a cash flow problem, I start digging in and say, you don't have a cash flow problem. You got a profit problem. Cash is not your problem. If you get profitable, cash will fix itself. Now we can always improve that and make it flow better.
Your cash problem is the result of your profit problem. Yeah,
it is. It absolutely. Yeah. And the thing is, this is the amazing thing that I noticed over years of doing this. Remember I said clearing distortions was step one in our process. Well, the reason for that is you will emotionally defend getting a paycheck every 2 weeks more so vigorously than you will defend bottom line profit. 100%. People are wimpy on defending their profit line until they kind of build that gnarly entrepreneurial muscle, that defends it. And so part of the reason is if I can get you to pay yourself a market wage, at least I know that we can bank on that piece and then grow you into some backbone to defend profit. But the way you defend profit is managing labor efficiency. It's just as simple as that. And for most businesses, it's a fairly straightforward thing. And so whenever you're not at the 2 LER, we go into the 3 Ps. Okay. Well, if you're not at your LER, here's the 3 Ps you got to ask yourself. The first question you should ask yourself in today's environment, especially, have I defended the value of my team by price? The first P is pricing. I've got to be bold. I've got to defend the value of my people, but I can't exceed market either. So I got to know market. And so that's one. The second one is, do I have the right processes in place? Have I given them a playbook? I've designed plays. I've given them tools that they need. All of that's there. And is anything there hindering people from getting work out the door? And then the last piece is, do I have the right people? And, you said this in your opening that I thought was pretty spot on. Yes, we're in a very constrained labor market for the foreseeable future. It's just not going to be anything different.
Yeah.
And whereas when we had a growing economy that was growing at a far more rapid rate than the government reported, when you look at, if you can measure, in my belief, now, once again, I'm just a chicken farmer from Alabama, so take this with a grain of salt. But from the data I've looked at from our clients, I think from the year 2000 to the year 2019 was the highest growth, true output years of the U.S. economy in a 20-year period that we've ever seen. I think hands down, we blew it away. But we blew it away for one reason, my generation. I'm at the tail end of the baby boomers. And that baby boomer generation, that was their swan song of not only because it takes 2 kernels for economic activity. I got to have a producer and I got to have a consumer.
That's exactly right.
And those baby boomers rode that 20-year period from 2000 to 2019 like it was a runaway train.
Yeah.
And our data shows before COVID hit, we dropped dramatically in our models in 2019. We dropped from an average 20+% growth rate for 17 and 18. And 2019, it dropped to 8%. And this is for, there's not really much inflation at all during those periods. So that was just pure activity.
Yeah.
And so the labor problem wasn't caused by COVID. Yes, we did lose 1 million or so active workforce. That's not insignificant, but for the most part, it's the baby boomers. It was their time to retire. All of my peers have retired. I like what I do and I don't plan to retire. I'd go nuts if I did, but I'm the exception to the rule. And And so these next generations are going to act differently. And matter of fact, I mean, I don't know if you touched on this in your podcast or not. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal last week talking about a disproportionate number of firings of Gen Zs because in their first year of work, because they're awful. Right? They don't know how to work. And there's a few that had to work their way through school or something like that. Those are the gems. I mean, when you catch somebody that worked their way through school, level on that person, that's a go getter. But the vast majority of them,
Dana White, the UFC guy, talks about teaching his kids. He's like, kids, if you have just this much amount of savage in you, you're gonna dominate.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And so it leads to this. I will say that I said this earlier talking to somebody. If you take the year 2020, 21, 22, 23, I think those 4 years are the examples of the 4 worst years in labor productivity of pure output for the dollars spent that we've ever had in the U.S. economy. I mean, the labor productivity sucked during that time frame. Now, a lot of people got away with it in 21 and 22 because they could inflate their way through it. But it hid the true productivity problem. And so one of the things that we're feeling right now in some of the downturn of business performance is the fact that the market is pushing back on saying, well, when things were scarce, I get that, you charged me a lot and gave me really crappy service, but I don't think I like that anymore.
Yeah.
Is there another, people are starting to look for another option.
Yeah.
And it's like you were saying about Dana White's comment. Absolutely. Any reasonable amount of service stands out like a sore thumb right now. It's so uncommon to actually get good service anywhere, these days. And which for me is painful because my team doesn't always give the service that I want them to give. And that hurts me. And it's like, when we have to double down our efforts to really bring these people along and teach them not only the technical concepts of what they need to know, but I got to teach them what good service actually looks like.
Greg, I want to put a fork in our opening topic, because I want to move on to a couple other nuances here. I've talked to you a few times, and this 2-to-1 ratio. This isn't a unique thing at this point in time. There's just something, and you talked about how the market forces, because you said price, process, and people, right?
Right.
So once you've committed to profit, and I've been so guilty of this. And so maybe coming out of like a private equity kind of a mindset, it's like, okay, we're gonna grow into this expense structure, and you can create a spreadsheet that might be true. And if you're really, 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 really badass and a little bit of luck, that's technically possible. But I think there's a lot more failures than there are successes in that plan.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But what is it about market forces that keep this 2-to-1 ratio true over time?
The interesting thing is costs have a tendency to stay in relative performance to each other. So the first thing is when you look at your P&L in the various buckets, you'll look at facilities costs, you'll look at your general overhead operating costs and those things. Every line item that you pay for something that's not a labor has labor in it. If you really deconstruct, labor makes up 55 to 60% of every dollar transacted if you find it all the way back to its original source. I mean, even if you're in the mining business, that stuff doesn't get out of the ground by itself. It takes labor.
Yeah.
And it takes labor all along the value chain, to deal with it. And so once you understand that labor is this minimum 50 to a maximum 60% of probably every dollar of value that goes to the system, then you start to realize, oh, okay, well, that's why they always stay relative to each other. And so the comment, that when we were talking before, the target LER is a 2 for 90% of the businesses right now. Now we've had significant technology and productivity increases in the last 20 years. LER 20 years ago was a 2. What was it 40 years ago? It was a 2. Because every time, and we're seeing this now, we've got some clients who are ahead of the curve with some technology integration and AI that's giving them a temporary advantage, or going offshore with, something. As soon as the rest of the market adopts those same concepts, competitive pricing begins, and it pushes you back to the statistical norm of what profitability looks like.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, Mike. When we pick up a new client, it takes us 10 minutes to identify their weakness in profitability, because it's just not rocket science. And then it becomes more of an analysis of going, okay, what are your trends? Are you trending downward in productivity? Are you trending upward in productivity? Now we can go next level labor productivity and measure direct labor versus management labor. We can, for bigger companies that even have greater divisions of labor, we can even slice those up deeper, depending on how good your data is.
Yeah.
But for most 5 million and under businesses, we don't even have to get into the segment details. We just look at it in the overall and say, listen, here's where you're headed. And here's, if I accept your gross margin as the market is giving it to you, here's what your labor should have been. Or here's the labor that you're committed to. Here's what they got to go produce to. And I basically create 2 brackets of, here's your cut equation, here's your grow equation. But both get you to profitability, which is the most likely. And here's my problem with all of the growth people. Now, I'm not against growth, but there's a reason why the subtitle of the second book said Rules for Smart Scaling. There's a lot of dumb scaling going on. I mean, we have had people come to us that showed a $5 million increase in revenue and a decrease in gross margin. And it's like, why did you do that? I mean, well, I'm more valuable. No, you're not. Any investor worth their salt does not look at the top line. They look at margin if you're a strip sale, and they look at EBITDA and really EBIT if you're a operating unit being purchased as its whole.
Yeah.
And it's like, they're not stupid. They don't know how to run businesses for the most part. And I think we're going to see a lot of that, kind of play out here over the next year or two. There are tons of bad private equity deals sitting out there right now, and it's going to be a buyer's market as those PE funds shed underperforming segments of their business and kind of restructure to get out of it. So there's going to be some deals finally we've not seen in a long time.
And a lot of those funds maturing, they're going to have to roll those assets off. So that's a whole nother.
Well, the one thing to watch out for is that private equity. So remember 2 years ago, the SPACs came out, the special purpose acquisition companies is what an SPAC stands for. Those are basically a public company they've raised money and they're publicly traded, but they hadn't figured out what to buy yet. And those were really a little bit ahead of their time, but I think you will see them eventually show up to take out the private equity businesses that need to turn over their portfolio to get that second bite of the apple. And the only way to get that second bite of the apple is to sell to a publicly traded business, more than likely. Because one, there's still a significant shortage of publicly traded companies. There's far more demand for public investment than we actually have companies to invest in.
No, that's 100% right. I want to talk about overstaffing.
Yep.
And maybe I combine a couple topics together here. Like I know seeing it in family members, my own personal experience there, even if you're running a fairly tight ship and you do have discipline to profit first, you don't think you're just going to grow into it. When you're a $1 million company, maybe you got 5 employees, maybe you got 10 employees, depending on your business. There are just plateaus that you just bump up against where you don't have enough money to keep margin to hire that 11th person because you break your model,
Right.
and you're also dying because
Right.
you're
Mhm.
working your face off.
Yep.
And maybe your people, sometimes there's hours in the day issue. Sometimes there's I can't afford to pay overtime. Sometimes it's a skill issue. I don't
Yeah.
have I don't have the people to get to the next level. What's your coaching for folks to break through these plateaus without overstaffing?
So step one is go pull out the first book and read the chapter on the black hole. So black holes are real. The black hole is between 1 million and 5 million in revenue. And the reason why it exists is once you get to a million, you have exactly that thing that you just said. You
Yeah.
have to hire people before they can be fully utilized. So I'm already putting strain on the business by hiring somebody that is not going to produce enough to truly cover them when they're fully utilized. And so the tricky part, and so I really focused of late on the deepest, darkest moment of the black hole is at 3 million. I mean, I will tell you, I mean, this has just been fascinating to watch businesses run up to that 3 million mark. And the greatest resistance is between that 2.5 to 3 million mark. And then you're just stuck in the cesspool if you kind of hang right above 3 million and you just can't get enough energy to pull out of it and get to that 4 and 5 million. But if you ever get to that 4 and 5 million, it's like, oh my goodness. Oh, life is just so much better. But here's the reason why. When you're at 2 million, you're a single cell amoeba as an entrepreneur. You're the head of the company, head of sales, head of marketing, head of operations.
Yeah.
The first entrepreneurial mitosis, where you split into a 2-cell entity, is as the owner, you have to either gravitate to marketing and sales or gravitate to operations and bring in somebody else of significant leadership skill. They don't have to be an owner, but they are a significant leader in
Yeah.
the business to lead that other piece.
Yeah.
Just unquestionably, if you gravitate as the owner to operations, you'll get stuck. I don't care if you like sales or not, but there's nobody that can sell at that size like the owner can. And so you've got to gravitate to hold on to marketing and sales until you cross the black hole and get to that 5 million. Once you're kind of at the 5 million, you can then start to leverage other people, create kind of team selling. A lot of it depends on what your sales and marketing profile is, for your business.
And a lot of B2Bs, you might get to 1 or 2 million based on Rolodex, right?
Exactly.
It's not just another management layer to do it, to perform a function. Now
Yep.
you got to sell to people who don't know you. It's
Yep. Exactly. And so I was stuck in my practice. I didn't think I could sell. I was not from Huntsville, Alabama. I've done everything in the CPA practice from traditional to consulting. I've done it all. And until I focused on hiring people to do the billable work and training them to do the billable work, which means teaching them to do things I do that nobody else at the time knew how to do. And then I focused on marketing, the part I didn't like, which this is how I got away with it. Mike Maxon is one of my partners that, if somebody contacts me, I'll be happy to interact with them, shortly, but I'm very quickly, hey, Mike will be in touch and he'll go through kind of, here's our offering and here's the pricing. And, then we can kind of go from there. And so my greatest value in the new business, the chain, is the marketing value of it, of creating awareness. And my worst value is the details of going back and forth, coordinating a call, talking about, what we do and scoping it, pricing it. I mean, all this, Mike's incredible at it. I mean, if you could just duplicate him, he'd be great. And so I think a lot of it is people just don't look at getting through that zone. But here's a couple of things of how to get through that zone. Number one is you got two choices. I can staff up and basically push profitability down to minimum acceptable levels or even below and believe that I'm going to grow my way through it. That usually doesn't work. because the problem is you're adding infrastructure at a guess rather than doing the more painful thing, but probably the more appropriate thing of I only add it as I have to. So what we recommend is you stretch the hell out of your people, run as fast. When you get to 2.5 million, your goal is to set your team down and say, listen, we got to run hard, run fast and get to 4 million. And the clouds will start to part when we get to 4 million, and we'll still have momentum to get to 5. But we got to stretch everybody and stretch every resource. And it's a season to get through. But if I can't remember a time that we got a client to 4 million that they ever gave ground back. But tons of people get to that 3.5 and they got to give back to a 2.5, and they just get stuck in purgatory.
And you get stuck there long enough and
you question your sanity. Yeah.
Well, you do in the things that got you there. Like you may have been, you could have been a rocket ship 0 to 2 million and plateauing growth to 3. And then you sit there long enough, the things that got you to 2, those if products change, industries change, buyers change, new competitors come in, you could have lost your value prop.
Well, but the change is the operative word. And so I'll give you my experience here. So we had consistently grew as a practice. This was back when we were independent before we merged, and we got stuck at 2.7 million. So first year ever in the history of the practice that we ever went backwards, or we didn't grow. We stayed within a rounding error of the same number. So we said, okay, we got to change something. So we changed business coaches. We had I still love the previous business coach we had, but it just wasn't resonating with the team. So we went to a new business coach, and all of a sudden we had our biggest growth. Up until that time, we'd never grown more than 150,000 total annual revenue a year. So it'd been slow and steady, just like most boring accountants are, and so we our new coach, we grew 500,000 that first year and went from 2.7 to 3.2. We get into the end of the year planning session with the team, and the first thing they want to do is, can we pause growth until we catch up? And I go, no, did you not read the book? This is after I wrote the first book. And the black hole is real. This is not the place to stop.
Yeah.
It's like that old country song of when you're going through hell, keep on going.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is not where you pause. So the next year we grew 800,000, got to 4 million. Next year we grew 600,000, got to 4.6. The next year we grew again to 5.3. And that was when we merged.
Yeah.
But there again, it took, so the philosophy, and this is where LER comes into play to validate, is it working the way you intended? The idea was don't, and get everybody to work to their highest value. So most valuable people spend their time getting the least valuable people busy. That doesn't accomplish the best outcome most of the time. I start at the top and say, I want my most valuable people who are doing the most valuable task. I don't want you to be busy. I want you to be working on the most valuable task.
Yeah.
And then work your way down from there. The people that I can afford to be idle is the lowest cost person. That person doesn't cost me as much as that expensive person that's idle.
Yeah. And ironically, it's easy to put your focus on that low cost, low performer because it might just be so visible to you, right?
It is. But you've also got to watch out for your high cost performers doing low value tasks and looking busy.
Yeah.
Busy doesn't get it. What did you do today that was worth your pay?
Which comes back to the formula, the LER. It's what is your labor ratio? Period.
And so for billable practices, most billing systems will allow you to calculate. I know an individual LER for my team. I know my team LER. We do consulting, outsourced bookkeeping, and tax. I know the LER by team and by person and by client. There's not a mystery. Now, Now, who caused it? I mean, that's subject to interpretation, but is it the client's fault? Is it the person's fault? Is it, the
Sure.
market's fault? Whatever.
Right.
But at least I know the data and where to put, that extra effort in of saying, what is it that I need to do, to transition.
Okay, one of the things that you've talked about is benchmarking. So, you just talked about understanding your labor efficiency ratio by departments, by client. You also said on a per employee basis. So when I think per employee, I'm benchmarking productivity. What's your guidance for business owners to benchmark productivity for their employees?
So typically what we want to see, there's been very, very few businesses that hasn't had an okay run at some point in time. So my easiest argument to win is to find a period of time where things were working. And then we dive in and say, okay, now you hit your total LER target, which means you hit your profit target. What did management labor and direct labor look like at that point? And then to the extent that we can take direct labor and dive deeper and say, okay, well, what was the best profile of a good customer relationship? What's the best LER profile for your range of team members? Because let's face it, I mean, I should get a higher multiplier off of a lower cost person. So the multiplier, I may only make a 2.5 all in, on a per hour basis. I might tell myself, oh, I'm marking this up 4 times. No. LER is a harsh taskmaster. It's called, what did that person bill in total? What did I pay them? And that includes their non-billable time. And so what you find in the services world, you got tortoises and hares. I got the tortoises that are 3 yards in a cloud of dust. They don't look exciting, but they're busy every moment. And it's like, you can generally put out an okay result. The hares are the ones you got to watch out for. They work in high bursts of energy, look great. They'll tell you about it, and they'll end up interrupting everybody else who should be working, telling them about how good they are and what they just did. And that's them recharging to get ready to make that other spurt. And I can win with both of them, but both of them have issues that I need to help manage them. And sometimes I got to poke the tortoises a little bit to say, can you go just a little faster? Can we maybe not do unnecessary, because you work so slowly, let's only do the things that are absolutely necessary when you're working fast. Can I get you to quit interrupting other people who are busy working, telling them about how good you did on that last job? And can you just leave the building and go take a break and recharge and then come back when you're ready to work again?
How do you do it for, like, some jobs are easy to track revenue, salespeople, right. I mean, manufacturing and producing widgets. So productivity is easy. What about other, maybe back office, overhead, maybe it's customer support where things are a little squishier? How do you
I mean, when you get to be larger, I mean, there's always, think of it like this. If once you get to size and I've got an isolated amount of labor, what is the numerator that I want to hold them accountable to? And so sometimes I have to get creative. Is it an ongoing number, or is it like, if it's sales, I'm more interested in new sales, not them processing recurring orders or those things. Right. So there's always a numerator. And so just think of it from the standpoint of, what am I going to hold these people accountable to? And can I access that data, and what is the rhythm that I can access that data on? So I had a manufacturing client that I told them, says, hey, I don't care what you guys do. You got to sell $2 of gross margin every week for every dollar of labor that week on payroll. That's it. Everything else works.
Yeah.
And so for them, I could get it down to just that plain blazingly simple. Now, there's other things, other nuances as you optimize the business and take it to its best possible performance. But the key is you got to lay those foundational principles of what total LER is. What does that translate into as a profit to gross margin target? And then looking at to whatever extent I can segment labor, because those smaller segments I'm just looking at those more like trends, because you can't necessarily compare yourself to another business because they're running a different playbook. They can even be in your same industry. Their total LER is the same, but so as we talk about the strategy of labor, I can go expensive direct labor, which means I got to skinny up my management labor to account for it. I can go inexpensive direct labor, which means I have to spend more money on management labor to overcome their deficiencies, or I can kind of have a balanced view. I can win with all three strategies.
Yeah.
Now, the problem, though, comes in if I go expensive direct labor, I have nowhere to go because I'm bumping up against what we call the replacement zone in your career labor efficiency arc. And that's a very, very, very real thing. So in the second book, probably one of our favorite graphs that people ask for all the time is this arc that you look at of going, here's what you produce throughout your life cycle as an employee. Here's what you're paid through that life cycle. And so in the beginning stages, we call that the training zone. You're paid more than what you produce. Mm-hmm. At the point that they intersect, you go into the second zone, which we call the chasing zone. And the chasing zone means I'm producing more than I'm being paid, and my pay should chase my performance, not the other way around.
Yeah.
If you ever get into performance chasing pay, you're dead.
Yeah.
Not going to work. And so pay will chase performance, but you ultimately get to the end of your career, or, it could be in the middle of your career too. It can happen anytime, but you get to where my wages have gone up and I just don't have that productivity engine left in me anymore. And when that graph crosses again, that goes into the third zone, which we call the replacement zone. I don't care how much I like you. I can't make any money off of you.
Yeah.
And you have to go.
And it's easy to judge our favorite sports teams and say, hey, thanks for your service. You were my favorite athlete. But 5 years later, you're not what you were used to be. A lot more emotion involved in those conversations on a 20-year career at a company, right?
It is. Well, and Jack Welch, I mean, he had a lot of really good ideas on the HR side of, listen, if you've got a strong balance sheet, you can afford to be compassionate. When that person who's been a longtime employee gets to that replacement zone, I mean, you give them a longer transition. You might give them a couple of months to transition. So Robert Glazer is a fellow EO member that's written a lot of good stuff on HR stuff. And he calls it the mindful transition. And so we have deployed that successfully multiple times where we got somebody, we like them, they do good work, they just can't be profitable in our environment. And so we say, listen, hey, we'll give you 2 months. So we're not overtly losing money, but you're holding a seat that we need better utilization out of those dollars that we're paying. And you're not going to get there. And we both agree to that. And so we'll give you 60 days to find. And as long as you're not disruptive, I mean, the moment something comes out of your mouth that's disruptive to the team, you get to leave right then.
Yeah.
And we have done this at least 10 times in transitioning people out, and they're very appreciative and they stay friends to the firm and, and send people to us even, as clients because we treated them fairly. And the good news right now is there's very few people that will go longer than 15 minutes before they find another job.
Yeah.
Because you're holding on to the wrong person. I need a wide receiver. I don't need a left tackle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the two can't do each other's job.
Right. I've seen this in many companies where like your curve makes sense where you're starting to overpay for the productivity. I haven't thought about it in that context, but sometimes if let's say things are rocking, you've got a market that's growing, you got a niche market that's growing, or you got a product that you got lightning in a bottle and you got a 3 or a 5 or maybe a 10, but probably a 3 to 5 year window where you have a competitive advantage and you really are growing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got really good human beings working for you that help get you from here to here.
Right.
And they just don't have the skills to get you from here to here.
That is absolutely true.
Yeah. What's your guidance there? Because maybe they still fit their productivity outpaces what your pay is, but
but I mean, there's a rare few that you can reassign to a different position, and we've had some success with that. But most of the time they just need to go on. It's like, it's okay. They'll be fine. It's different. When I grew up in the 70s and 80s, we had 11% unemployment during recessions. You felt bad. You felt emotionally bad to let somebody go because, they're going to be in the soup line.
Right.
Forget about unemployment. You got nothing. And so that's a little different. Today,
you know what, you're right. And everything's changed, like expectations for time in the company and whatnot. But when you're putting somebody out at 3.8% in unemployment, if they want to work, they're gonna have a job.
We're to the unemployable. I keep asking this question every talk I give all around the country. I even ask it in Dubai. Do you personally know somebody's unemployed? And the answer is no. I occasionally I'll get somebody, oh, I know somebody. Says, okay, well, tell me what's their situation. Oh, well, he's this super high end specialized engineer in some kind of geologist or whatever. And it's like, okay,
or a series of life choices have led down a path.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I guarantee you there is a long list in every city right now of dirty, smelly, unpleasant, hard jobs that pay really, really well. And if you're hungry, go to work. I grew up on a chicken farm shoveling chicken manure. Listen, if you can shovel chicken poop, you can do just about anything. Yeah. And it's like, hey, if my family needs to be fed, I don't care what the job is.
Yeah.
Get over it.
Maybe let's touch on one last thing. We're about 50 minutes in. You and I were chatting earlier about AI, and hard to have a conversation about labor productivity. Understand the LER and the in the 2.0 ratio. That makes sense. And I know the punchline here, but give us your take on where does AI play into all this?
Well, where we've seen it the most used is in marketing firms, putting out more content. Doesn't necessarily mean it's better. So some are better at that than others. Yeah. But you're definitely seeing a significant reduction in what freelancers used to do, both in ideation, simple graphic design things that just need to be popped out, and then I don't need it to be super special. I just need it to be unique and non-trademark, and any image will do, kind of thing. And so I really think it's really affected that industry a lot. I worry that people are overproducing soulless content. However, as one of the resources that we use for my speaker website, they've been producing more articles that they keep feeding it, that like they'll eventually feed it this podcast, to listen to, and it incorporates what I'm saying into how it writes articles theoretically in my voice. Yeah. And the first couple were rough, and boy, the last couple is like, wow, that's pretty good. Yeah. And so it'll get there. But here's the thing. It is more about, I don't remember, it might've been you that said this when we were talking this morning. It's more about how good you are at managing AI is the labor efficiency value.
Yeah.
The market is going to force you to use it because you just cannot keep up with what it can produce.
Yeah. My grandpa was a farmer, I want to say 140 acres, him and my dad and 3 sisters growing up in the Dust Bowl of Nebraska. And, they worked 7 hours a day, 15 hours a day to squeak out a living. When I grew up in the 80s, my dad had 5,000 acres and a handful of hired men, but he had a bunch of big ass tractors. It was technology, right? That
That's right.
Be more productive. And so,
as we had a 2-row planter and cultivator. You guys had 8, 10, 16 rows. I have probably massively wide ones, because all of our fields were probably 20 acres or less. You could barely turn around by the time you got one of those big rigs in there, and it didn't make sense in the little patch farming, where I grew up. But you get out to where the open fields in Nebraska and it's like, okay, I can turn that sucker on and, it'd be like Clarkson's farm, on Prime, which is a hilarious episode.
It's technology. I mean, we don't think of a tractor as being technology, but it was.
Well, it is. Absolutely.
It was right. I think AI is the same way. I think there's no question, like somebody like in marketing, it's obvious around things like content creation, but man, customer support.
Here's my big prediction, and you fact check me 2 years from now if I'm right. But I don't think Google's going to make any money from paid search in 24 months. Because right now on this phone, I have 2 buttons on the face of the phone that are AI search bots that gives me discrete answers to a question. And I've just been intentionally choosing to use those first. And so far, I have yet to have to go to a Google search after what I search for on either ChatGPT or Claude is the other one I'm using at the moment that somebody had recommended. Yeah. And so I think this will be the fastest adoption of technology of using AI search parameters, and more so even conversant. My generation, I've never been a Siri, person. I hate talking back and forth to it, but I probably will get there in that. And
I have no doubt you will. I mean,
but there again, why would anybody want to use a search engine that is influenced by paid sponsorship versus I want to do a pure search for what I want? And if I can at least remotely describe what it is I'm trying to get answered, why would I want it to be influenced by somebody spending more ad dollars?
Well, and here, 9 months ago, I'm in Phoenix. And Phoenix is easy because it's a city laid out on a grid, so it's easier than say San Francisco or Boston.
Mm-hmm.
But you could take Uber, maybe you could call a cab still. I didn't see any, but there's Ubers everywhere. But there's Waymo, there's driverless cars. And I got to tell you, I took my first one just for the hell of it.
Oh, you did? Oh, yeah. You're braver than I am.
Well, you know what? I did it as a novelty, and then I realized the car's cleaner. The user experience from here was as good, if not better, than an Uber. And it seamlessly transitioned to the big, beautiful screen in the vehicle. And there was nobody to tip or have an awkward conversation because I worried about how they are going to rate me. The user experience was amazing. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there doing this, what started out as a novelty. I'm like, was it 3.1 million over the road truckers without college degrees in the US? It's a matter of time. It just seems so obvious. So it's like, okay, some people will be displaced, but just like farmers were displaced by tractors,
right,
they go to other work. And I think the thing to fear is not, are you going to be replaced by AI? It's going to be, especially if you're a business owner, it's you're not competing against AI. You're competing against your competitor and how much better at AI they are than you. That's what you're competing against.
Exactly. So there was an ad on the radio today when I was coming back to the office about Amazon jobs that they're willing to train you to be a robot repair person if you've been a picker of packages in their warehouse. So, hey, if you've driven for Amazon, if you've done anything for Amazon, you're a current Amazon employee, we will train you to be one of our robot repair people in our automated warehouses.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which are apparently are just marvels of technology.
Maybe the last thing, I'll give you the final word, but when we're talking about AI, then it makes me think, okay, productivity for some has started. I'm a believer in AI. I'm kind of deep in that ocean right now.
Yeah.
It's going to be a game changer of employee productivity. But what you said, half hour ago, this 2.1, 2.5, 2.0 ratio, your labor efficiency ratio.
Mm-hmm.
If you're using AI and your competitors using AI, you got the same pricing cost structures.
Right.
I don't think it changes a damn thing out of today's conversation. I'll give you the
absolutely. I'll stand by that until the only thing that changes that is if we get into a crazy imbalance of excess labor And even then, it's still going to stay roughly to that number. But you have, when labor is willing to work at a, abnormally low rate, I just don't see the government allowing that to happen. I mean, I think if we get into an excess labor situation, which I don't even see how we get there, given birth rates and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you get into the one thing that spikes it on the other side is you have supply chain disruptions, and you see predatory pricing of things that don't make economic sense in a normal trade environment.
Mm-hmm.
And that will create temporary distortions. But I think we always come back to the two. We always come back to the two.
I think,
and I don't see how any of those other costs change, otherwise. But you're absolutely right that, the people who harness AI and the people who also harness international labor, our favorite spot has been the Philippines. We've seen more success with clients getting labor out of the Philippines than any other place in the world. But you're getting more productivity than the comparable skill set of a U.S. worker, and you're paying a fourth, probably at least, no more than a fourth of what you'd pay for that U.S. person. But even those people, they're getting away with an extra performance at the moment. And I've warned all of them, yeah, it's great right now, but as your competitors do exactly the same thing, the price will revert back to that competitive number.
Over the long haul, cost of living there is going to increase as their economy grows. Your competitors are going to do the same thing. It all comes back down that you have to profit first, and you have to manage to this productivity ratio. So all the other HR things we talk about on this show, you can't choose to intentionally break the law. You got to follow the law. You got to be compliant. But
their labor rates are actually accelerating faster than ours at a rate. It's just a smaller number right now.
That's right. That's right. Greg, anything else you want to say in conclusion here?
I think we've got a lot to chew on. So
I enjoy our conversations very much. Thanks.
A lot of fun. Anytime.
And thanks to everybody else for joining us. Highly recommend the books. The first one, Simple Numbers, Straight Talk. And I'll emphasize Greg's second book. He said it. The title of the show is Mission to Grow. So the subheader, Rules for Smart Scaling. So there's ways to grow, and we want everybody to do it in as smart a way as possible. So thank you for letting me be part of your Mission to Grow. Thanks, Greg. That's it for this episode of Mission to Grow. Thanks for joining us today. For show notes and more episodes, visit us at missiontogrowth.com. If you found this content valuable, I invite you to share it with a friend and subscribe to the show. If you really want to help, I'd love it if you left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen. Mission to Grow is sponsored by Assure. Assure helps more than 100,000 businesses get access to capital, stay compliant, and develop the talent they need to grow. To learn more about how Assure can help your business grow, visit assuresoftware.com. Until next time.